Imagine standing at your desk watching the very company you helped build, the colleagues you once called friends, and a boss you admired suddenly turn against you in a single moment. No warning, no mercy, just a cold, public dismissal that sends your world crashing down. That's exactly what happened to Rachel Patterson, a dedicated employee who believed she'd found her dream career. Humiliated in front of her peers, she was on the verge of losing hope when the most unlikely person reached out an unassuming janitor she had barely acknowledged before. He pressed a small key into her trembling hand, and with that simple gesture everything changed. Rachel Patterson woke that morning with a sense of mild anxiety prickling at her chest. It was a crisp December day, and she thought the uneasiness was simply the product of the intense meeting her department had scheduled with the new executive board she had worked at Westbridge Innovations for nearly 6 years, dedicated to the marketing department. In that time, she had climbed from being an intern, running for Starbucks coffee orders, and sorting mail to a junior associate, spearheading major projects. Yet lately, there had been trouble in the air. The company had begun a process of restructuring after a big investor deal. Rachel noted the hush-hush conversations in corners, the frantic hush among department heads, and a drastically changed atmosphere. Co-workers, once cheerful, chatty, and always ready to help, had grown quiet. The new leadership, particularly the imposing figure of the newly appointed Chief Operating Officer Victor Hall, seemed intent on shaking things up. As Rachel got off the subway that morning and walked toward the towering glass building of Westbridge Innovations, she tried to shove away her unease. She reminded herself of her accomplishments, the marketing campaigns she had salvaged when everything seemed doomed, the long hours she clocked in with no complaints, and the times her creative ideas had won the company new clients. If there was a board meeting that day, maybe it would bring positive news or an expanded role for her. She recalled a rumor that the board might be awarding a top performer with an internal promotion, which she assumed might be her friend Katrina, or possibly even herself. Outside the main doors, she paused. The reflection on the shiny glass facade showed a woman with determined eyes, hidden behind a touch of uncertainty. She gave her reflection a nod, as though to remind herself that this was her day to shine. Then she stepped inside. Rachel's heartbeat quickened as she rode the elevator up to the marketing floor on the 22nd level. Her phone buzzed a text from Katrina. "Heads up, they're calling a company-wide meeting at noon. Look sharp." She exhaled sharply. Company-wide meetings never felt good these days. Someone was always getting laid off or demoted. She texted back a quick thanks for the warning and tried to focus on the tasks she had to do before noon. As she approached her desk, she noticed a swirl of activity. The new COO, Victor Hall, was prowling the aisle with a purposeful stride. He was flanked by the head of human resources, Clarissa Stone, a woman whose presence often signaled major corporate announcements, or more distressingly terminations. Rachel's immediate supervisor, Miles Carmichael, stood to the side, wearing an anxious expression as he watched Victor and Clarissa pass. Miles was generally a laid-back manager, the type who carried a world's best boss mug around the office. Ironically, today, his posture was rigid, and the usual grin was replaced by a tight, forced smile. Rachel offered him a small wave, but he just blinked as though he hadn't really seen her. A knot formed in Rachel's stomach. Just then, she spotted Isaiah Johnson, the janitor who had been quietly maintaining the office floors for as long as she had worked there. He nodded at her politely, pushing his cart of cleaning supplies. Rachel managed a weak smile. Back she'd always liked Isaiah, even though they rarely spoke beyond quick greetings. Something about his calm presence had a soothing effect on the entire place. In the background, Victor's voice boomed as he chatted with Clarissa. Rachel couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear, authoritative, direct, with no patience for small talk. She quickly settled into her cubicle, typed in her login, and tried to catch up on emails before the big meeting. She told herself, just focus on your work. Don't panic. But her thoughts buzzed with a sense of impending doom. At precisely noon, every employee in the marketing department filed into the main conference hall. The room was packed, hundreds of people from different departments, crammed into chairs, lined the walls, or stood in the back. The tension was heavy, like the suffocating humidity before a thunderstorm. Rachel took a seat next to Katrina and tried to calm the drumming of her heart. Victor Hall stepped onto the makeshift stage at the front of the room. Behind him, a huge screen displayed the Westbridge Innovations logo, along with a tagline, "Moving forward to a new era." He smiled coldly. "Thank you all for coming," he said in a measured, resonant tone. "As many of you know, we're implementing significant structural changes. This is not just about efficiency. It's about forging a new path for Westbridge Innovations to keep pace with our vision and the demands of the market." Rachel glanced at Katrina, who wore a concerned frown. Even if big cuts were coming, no one imagined that they would happen quite so publicly. Usually firings occurred behind closed doors in HR's neatly sterile offices, but something about the way Victor carried himself suggested he had no qualms about making his decisions known to everyone. Sure enough, after a few slides demonstrating new organizational charts and bullet points about streamlining workforce capacity, Clarissa Stone took the microphone. "As part of our plan," Clarissa began, "we have identified certain roles and individuals that are unfortunately no longer aligned with the direction of the company." She paused, scanning the crowd. "I deeply regret to announce that these changes begin effective immediately." A ripple of shock flooded the room. People exchanged worried glances. A hush fell so profound that Rachel could hear her own heartbeat throbbing in her ears. Clarissa's eyes landed on the front row, and she uttered a name. A man near the stage stood with trembling hands. Everyone recognized him. He was the lead of a small accounting team. He swallowed hard and stepped forward, while Clarissa announced that the company was letting him go. One by one, Clarissa read out a list of names. Each person humiliated walked to the front to receive a sealed envelope, likely their severance package details, and a handshake that felt more like a slap in the face. Some employees looked numb, others fought tears. The entire scene felt surreal, more like a twisted performance than a corporate action. And then came the final name, Rachel Patterson. Time froze. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. She looked around, certain there must be a mistake. But no. Clarissa was looking straight at her. The crowd parted, forming a path down the middle, like a corridor of judgment. Katrina's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Miles. Carmichael stared intently at his shoes, unwilling to meet her gaze. "Rachel Patterson," Clarissa repeated, as if calling attendance. "Would you please come up front?" Shackily Rachel stood. Her vision blurred with tears that threatened to spill any second. She forced herself to put one foot in front of the other. Making the walk of shame, this has to be a mistake. Her mind screamed, "I've done so much for this place." Victor Hall stood, tall arms folded. "Rachel Patterson," he intoned gravely. "Your services are no longer required at Westbridge Innovations. We are grateful for your time here and wish you well in your future endeavors," fired in front of the entire company. A hush of disbelief spread through the room. Some jaws dropped in sympathy. Others wore the stunned expression of raw shock. The humiliating spectacle of it all tore at Rachel like 1,000 tiny knives. She took the envelope Clarissa handed her. She opened her mouth, but no words emerged. "Security will escort you out shortly," Clarissa said. Rachel's eyes flicked to the back where two uniformed guards hovered, and just like that, her world shattered. The next 30 minutes passed in a haze. Rachel was ushered to her desk, flanked by security, where she was told to pack her personal belongings in a cardboard box. The unwavering stares of her co-workers stung like salt on a fresh wound. Some offered sympathetic glances, while others looked relieved. It wasn't them. A handful were too petrified to respond. Katrina slipped over briefly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Rachel." But she had to pull away when the stern gaze of a security guard cut their conversation short. Gathering her photo frames, notebooks, and a potted plant, Rachel felt numb. She was too shocked to cry. This was the company she had given 6 years of her life to. She'd worked late nights, weekends, even holidays. Every success story from the marketing department had in some way her fingerprints all over it, and yet none of that mattered now. She felt like a used rag being tossed aside. She walked toward the elevator box in her arms. The doors opened with a ding. The security guards waited to escort her down. As she entered, she caught sight of Victor Hall's face, observing from a distance. His expression was stony, unreadable. At that moment, Rachel wished she could scream, break free, or do something, but all she managed was an empty, defeated stare. The ride down to the lobby felt interminable, each floor passing in slow motion. When the doors slid open, she stepped out. Officer staff parted to give her space, or perhaps to avoid the radioactive aura of the fired one. She could feel their curiosity burning holes into her. Gritting her teeth, she kept her head high as best she could, forcing her feet to move toward the exit. Just when she thought she couldn't sink any lower, the final blow came at the reception desk. A security officer approached, brandishing a form on a clipboard. "Sign here to confirm the retrieval of your personal belongings," he said tonelessly. As Rachel started scribbling her signature, her vision blurred. Her ears rang with the hum of quiet chatter, a sound that seemed to amplify every ounce of her humiliation. She placed the pen down. The officer nodded, turned, and walked away. And then she heard a soft voice behind her, "Miss Patterson." She turned around. There stood Isaiah Johnson, the janitor who had always moved silently around the building. His eyes were kind as he glanced at her. He reached into the pocket of his dark blue uniform and pulled out a small, tarnished key. Without a word, he extended his hand and gently pressed the key into her palm. She stared at it. "Confused, Isaiah," she whispered, unable to form a full sentence. Why?" He offered a faint smile, though sorrow flickered in his eyes. "This building is old," he said softly, nodding at the key. "Some places are hidden. Some doors need opening." Then he turned and walked back toward the elevator without further explanation. Rachel stood there, the key cold in her hand. A swirl of questions erupted inside her. What door could this possibly open? Why was he giving it to her now at her lowest point? It didn't make sense. Outside, the icy air hit her like a slap. Clutching the cardboard box of her belongings and the mysterious key in her jacket pocket, Rachel stepped onto the sidewalk. The world moved on around her. Taxis raced by pedestrians, hurried to lunch. No one noticing her heartbreak. She wanted to crumble, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to let tears fall in the public. She had to focus on something else, anything else. And so she gripped the key, letting its metallic edges press into her hand, as if that small gesture might keep her anchored. She had no idea how much the key would come to mean in the days ahead. Later that evening, in the cramped comfort of her tiny Manhattan apartment, Rachel finally let herself cry. She sobbed over the kitchen table, the severance papers spread out in front of her. The paltry compensation felt like a final insult compared to the years she had invested. The shadows of the city lights cast jagged shapes across her living room floor. Matching the jagged ache in her heart, she poured herself a glass of water, then slumped onto the couch. The small key Isaiah had given her caught her eye. She pulled it out of her coat pocket and held it up to the lamp. It was old-fashioned, likely made of brass, with a few patches of rust. She wondered if Isaiah had found it somewhere in the dusty storage rooms or boiler rooms of Westbridge. Why give it to her? Her mind drifted back through random encounters with Isaiah. He was a quiet presence, always cleaning late at night when most employees had left. On a few occasions, she had stayed past midnight to finish a project, and she remembered small moments once he had offered her a cup of coffee from the break room. Another time, he had kindly replaced a flickering light bulb in her cubicle so she wouldn't have to strain her eyes. She had always thanked him politely, but life was so busy, she never thought beyond those simple pleasantries. Now his gesture felt like a strange sign, a code she couldn't decipher. She pulled her laptop onto her lap, typed in the login for her personal email. Among the flood of new messages, consolation notes from co-workers who had found out about her firing, she spotted a cryptic email from an address she didn't recognize, email protected. The subject line read, "He gave you the key. Don't ignore it." Her heartbeat skipped. She clicked open the email. The message contained just one line. "If you want answers, meet me at 10 p.m. tomorrow at the 23rd floor maintenance closet." Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs. The 23rd floor was used mainly by the engineering and product design teams. She had rarely ventured there, but she knew it was often deserted after hours. Was this from Isaiah? But the email was from an unknown address. Was it some sort of prank? She closed her laptop and rubbed her temples. Sleep would not come easily tonight. The following day was torture. Rachel avoided social media, dreading the pity-laced messages that might flood her inbox. She rummaged through job listings, but couldn't focus. Her mind kept circling back to the cryptic email, the key in her pocket, and the memory of Isaiah's solemn gaze. By late afternoon, she decided she had to know. She needed closure. Even if it was some bizarre prank, she had nothing more to lose. She dressed in dark jeans and a hoodie, grabbed her Metro card and headed out. Ignoring the bitter chill of the wind whipping through the city streets, she arrived at the Westbridge Innovations building around 9:45 p.m. The lobby was almost empty, except for a security guard stationed at the front desk. The guard glanced at her, but said nothing as she walked toward the elevator bank. She was still technically allowed in common areas until her official termination date locked her out of the system. Rachel's pulse thundered when the elevator opened on the 23rd floor. The corridor was dimly lit, the overhead fluorescents switched to nighttime mode. Most office doors were locked. She navigated the hallway scanning for a maintenance sign. Eventually, she found a nondescript door marked with peeling letters, "Maintenance Closet. Authorized personnel only." The doorknob wouldn't budge. She tried the key Isaiah gave her. To her astonishment, the door unlocked with a soft click. She slipped inside. The closet was larger than she expected, lined with shelves of cleaning supplies, dusters, and spare light bulbs. And in the center stood Isaiah, wearing the same navy blue jumpsuit he always wore, though now it bore fresh streaks of paint and dust. He held a small flashlight in one hand. Rachel froze. "Isaiah," she managed to say. What's going on?" "Why did you?" He raised a finger to his lips, then motioned for her to follow. He led her toward the back, where a second door stood, partially concealed behind a shelving unit, pulling the shelves aside. He revealed a narrow passage that descended into darkness. The old key in Rachel's hand fit there too. Heart pounding, she followed him. They moved carefully down a steep flight of metal stairs, each step echoing. The air grew musty, carrying the scent of old concrete and stale water. The corridor below was faintly lit by overhead bulbs that flickered ominously. If Rachel hadn't been so consumed by curiosity and a strange sense of trust in Isaiah, she might have panicked. At the bottom, the corridor stretched out, lined with pipes and vents. Large authorized personnel. Only signs were plastered here and there. Isaiah walked ahead, shining his flashlight in front of them. Finally, they reached what appeared to be an old service room. The door was battered, rusted around the edges. He pushed it open. Inside, Rachel caught her breath. This was no ordinary storage space. Though dimly lit, she could see it was set up like a small workspace or hidden office. There was a battered wooden table scattered with papers, a couple of chairs, and some outdated computer equipment stacked in a corner. A single flickering fluorescent tube cast harsh shadows on the walls. Isaiah turned to her, switching off the flashlight. "I'm sorry to bring you here under such strange circumstances," he said, his voice measured and calm. "But I need your help." Rachel was beyond confused. "Help with what, Isaiah? I just got fired. I don't have any pull here anymore." Isaiah shook his head. "This isn't about your position at Westbridge. It's about something bigger. Corruption, embezzlement. People who have lost their livelihoods because of these structural changes." His usually gentle eyes hardened with resolve, and the worst of it all might be tied to Victor Hall. A chill ran through Rachel. "What do you mean?" Isaiah pressed his palm flat on the table. "I've worked in this building for 13 years. Ms. Patterson janitors, we see everything. We're invisible to them. They talk freely, leave documents out. We hear conversations in hallways, bathrooms. I've seen patterns, financial records that don't match, employees targeted for layoffs right after they discovered shady dealings, hush money payouts. I've spent months gathering evidence. But I can't blow this open on my own. I need someone who understands corporate strategies, marketing angles, the flow of internal communications. Someone who can interpret these documents better than I can. Someone who can help me expose the truth." He rummaged through a folder on the table, pulling out printouts and spreadsheets. "These are taken from the trash and from unsecured printers. They show massive misappropriations. Westbridge was siphoning money from certain projects, inflating budgets, and funneling it to a shell account. Employees who asked too many questions got fired or quietly pushed out." Rachel stared at him in disbelief. "So you're saying my termination?" He nodded gravely. "You oversaw marketing campaigns that brought in revenue, but you also had access to sensitive budget details, too close to the suspicious numbers apparently. Perhaps you would have eventually noticed the disparities, so they got rid of you." A bitter wave of anger washed over Rachel. The humiliation she endured began to transform into a fierce determination. "Why didn't you try to warn me?" Before she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Isaiah sighed. "I've been collecting info for a while, but I wasn't sure who to trust." Then the layoffs began in earnest. "When I saw them fire you so publicly, I knew you were a victim, not part of the scheme. I had to act." Rachel looked around the hidden office. Her mind spun. "This is insane. If what you're saying is true, we're dealing with high-level fraud. This could be dangerous." Isaiah nodded. "I know. That's why I kept this hidden. But with your expertise and connections, we might be able to leak this to the right people. Bring justice for you and everyone else. If you're willing, she gazed at the documents. Her life had been upended in a single day. But ironically, she had never felt so alive. If there was a chance to get back at Victor Hall and his cronies to redeem her shattered dignity, she had to take it. She turned to Isaiah, eyes fierce. "I'm in." They spent the next several hours poring over documents, cross-referencing receipts, and trying to piece together the elaborate puzzle of Westbridge's financial manipulations. Isaiah showed her screenshots of emails he'd recovered from a neglected print server. They indicated that certain executives, Victor Hall's name appeared multiple times, had funneled funds from legitimate projects into personal offshore accounts. Rachel recognized many of the internal code names for marketing initiatives. Her heart pounded as she realized the extent of it all. As the night wore on, the temperature in the hidden office dropped. Rachel's hands shook partly from the cold, partly from adrenaline. She realized with a start that it was nearly 3 a.m. They decided to call it a night, gather their notes, and plan to meet again. "Soon you should take these files," Isaiah said, handing her a USB drive. "They're backed up from the office's unmonitored server. If anything happens to me, you need to keep these safe." Rachel swallowed hard. "I will." "But Isaiah, won't they notice you messing around down here?" He offered a slight smile. "I've done it for months. They're too arrogant to notice a janitor. Still, we have to be careful." Before they parted ways, they agreed on a strategy. Rachel would reach out to a trusted friend in investigative journalism. She had once done a marketing campaign for a local news station, forging a connection with a reporter who'd gone on to work at the New York Times. Maybe that contact could help them blow the whistle. As Rachel rode the elevator down alone, she clutched the USB in her coat pocket. A swirl of emotions electrified her: fear, anger, hope. She felt a glimmer of purpose again, a sense that perhaps her firing wasn't just an end, but a brutal beginning. The next morning, bleary-eyed from lack of sleep, Rachel composed a carefully worded email to Alicia Malone, the reporter she'd met years ago. She simply hinted at sensitive information regarding corporate corruption and asked if Alicia might be interested in meeting for coffee. She hit send, heart pounding. Would Alicia even remember her? She tried to push the potential meeting out of her mind and focus on analyzing more of the data from the USB drive. As she scoured documents, it became evident that the fraud scheme was bigger than she imagined. Budgets for marketing, product development, and even philanthropic programs were manipulated. Westbridge had boasted about their charitable contributions to local communities. Rachel had even created promotional material for it. But now she saw that only a fraction of the promised money had ever reached those charities. The rest appeared to vanish into suspicious accounts. Her phone buzzed. A response from Alicia. "Rachel, I do remember you intrigued by what you mentioned. Let's meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the Grand Café on 5th. Looking forward, relief washed over Rachel. She allowed a small smile. Here was a glimmer of a path forward, someone with the power to break the story wide open. But the stakes were high, and she had no illusions about the danger. If Westbridge's upper management caught wind of her plan, they could bury the story, or worse. Throughout that day, a creeping doubt began to nibble at her resolve. What if Alicia can't do anything? What if the story is too big or complicated? What if the only result is retaliation? She tried to push the fears aside, focusing instead on the idea that truth must prevail. The next afternoon, Rachel arrived at the Grand Café on 5th Avenue 15 minutes early. She fiddled nervously with the USB drive in her purse, ordering a small coffee just to occupy her hands. The cafe was bustling with well-dressed professionals, the aroma of freshly ground beans wafting through the air. She scanned the crowd until she spotted Alicia Malone, a tall woman with short, styled hair and a sharp, inquisitive gaze, entering in a tailored blazer. Rachel High Alicia greeted her warmly, motioning for them to take a seat at a small table in the corner. After brief, small talk, Alicia got straight to the point. "So you said you have something on Westbridge Innovations." With a deep breath, Rachel began. She explained how she was fired in front of everyone, then revealed the existence of hidden documents and suspicious activities. She tried to keep Isaiah's name out of it, for now describing him only as a confidential informant. Alicia took notes rapidly, her eyes shining with that journalistic hunger for a big scoop. When Rachel handed her the USB drive, Alicia's expression grew intense. This could be massive," she said, voice low. "I have to verify these files confirm their authenticity. If everything checks out, I'll need to get my editor on board. We'll do everything in our power to protect your identity. But you know how these corporate scandals go. Westbridge might try to discredit you." Rachel's stomach flipped, I know. But this can't go on. Too many people have lost their jobs. The corruption is destroying lives. Alicia leaned forward, placing a reassuring hand on Rachel's arm. "We'll do our best to handle this discreetly, but you have to be prepared. These people won't go down without a fight." They wrapped up the meeting with a plan to stay in close contact. Alicia insisted on putting the drive in a secure location. That same night, they parted ways, Rachel feeling a surge of hope. Twined with dread, she checked her phone. No messages from Isaiah. She wondered if he was okay. Back at her apartment, Rachel was too restless to sleep. She paced the living room, imagining all the possible repercussions. She trusted Alicia, but as an ex-employee with no official standing, Rachel worried her claims could be dismissed unless they had ironclad proof. To calm her nerves, she called Katrina. Her friend picked up sounding cautious. "Rachel, are you okay? I've been worried about you. People at the office are still buzzing about how they fired you." Rachel hesitated. She couldn't reveal too much yet, but she needed an ally. "I'm doing something risky. I found out there's some serious wrongdoing going on, Katrina. If you can keep an eye on things from the inside, like any weird movements or hush-hush meetings, could you let me know?" Katrina sounded alarmed. "Rachel, you're scaring me. Are you sure it's safe?" "No," Rachel admitted, voice trembling. "But it's important. I promise I won't drag you in too deep. Just keep your ears open." "Okay," Katrina agreed. Albeit reluctantly, Rachel breathed a bit easier, feeling less isolated. She ended the call, sank into her couch, and finally drifted into a fitful sleep. Days passed in a blur of phone calls, email exchanges, and nerve-wracking silence. Alicia was busy verifying the documents, contacting external financial analysts, and carefully building the story without tipping off Westbridge. Rachel tried to distract herself by polishing her resume, applying to new jobs, and dealing with the emotional aftermath of her public firing. Late one afternoon, she received a frantic text from Katrina. "They're talking about an internal leak. Victor and Clarissa are furious. They suspect someone has evidence against them. Be careful, they've started combing through staff emails." Rachel's blood ran cold. If they found out Isaiah had been snooping, or if they discovered her involvement before the story broke, the repercussions could be severe. She typed back, "Thanks for letting me know. Stay safe." She immediately thought of Isaiah. They had arranged another clandestine meeting. But maybe it was too dangerous now. She could feel the noose tightening. The next hours were agonizing as she waited to see if Isaiah would text or email. Nothing came. That night, Rachel decided to check the hidden office for Isaiah. She had to warn him. She navigated the dark corridors and used the key to open the maintenance closet. Once again, she descended into the underground corridor, but this time the air felt different. An eerie stillness that prickled her skin. When she reached the hidden room, she found it dimly lit by a single lamp. Papers were scattered across the floor. Some of the old files tossed about, as though someone had ransacked the place. Her heart pounded. "Isaiah," she called softly, little more she ventured further in. The table was upended, and the computer monitor was shattered. Panic surged. Had Westbridge security found the hideout? She scanned the area, mind racing. Where was Isaiah? A faint moan from the shadows startled her. She rushed to the corner and found Isaiah slumped against the wall, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped through his uniform. Oh my God. Isaiah. Rachel gasped, dropping to her knees. What happened? He winced. His breathing labored. They found this place. 2 men. I think they work for Victor. They cornered me. Took the rest of the files. He grimaced in pain. I managed to hide some of the key documents before they arrived, but... Rachel fought back tears as, "We need to get you to a hospital." He shook his head weakly. No hospitals. They'll find me. Just help me out of here. I'll go to a friend's place. Someone I trust. We can't let them silence us. Heart-hammering, Rachel helped Isaiah up, supporting his weight. They staggered out of the secret room, up the stairs and back to the maintenance closet. She prayed they wouldn't run into any security personnel. The hallways were deserted, but every echo made her flinch. Once they reached the lobby, Rachel whispered to a half-asleep security guard that her uncle had slipped and needed medical attention. She managed to guide Isaiah into a taxi outside. What about the documents? Rachel asked, her voice trembling. If they took them? Isaiah's eyes flickered with pain and determination. They took some. Not all the USB you gave to the reporter. That's the real gold. Don't let them stop you. The taxi sped off, carrying them into the streets. Rachel pressed a makeshift bandage against Isaiah's wound, tears burning her eyes. This is so much bigger than I ever imagined. Isaiah insisted on being dropped off at a run-down apartment complex on the Lower East Side. He refused to let Rachel call an ambulance, claiming the attention would be too risky. "I have a friend who's a retired medic," he said through gritted teeth. "She'll patch me up." Rachel felt sick with worry, but she had no choice but to trust him. She helped him to the door of apartment 4B, where a woman in her 60s, wearing pajamas and a stern expression, ushered them inside Isaiah. "What did you get yourself into this time?" she muttered quickly, moving to treat his wound. He waved Rachel off when she offered to stay. "You need to go," he told her gently. "Keep the plan alive. I'll be okay." Torn, Rachel left, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She gripped her phone, wanting to call Alicia immediately, but it was almost midnight and Alicia might be asleep. Instead, she sent an urgent text. "We need to talk," they found out. "They attacked our source. Please call ASAP." Her phone remained silent as she made her way home. The next morning, Alicia finally replied to Rachel's frantic messages. They arranged to meet at Alicia's apartment in Brooklyn to avoid prying eyes. Alicia buzzed her in, greeting her with a grim expression. "I just received confirmation," Alicia said, offering a seat on the couch. "The documents on that USB are authentic. My editor is ready to run the story, but we need an official statement or some corroborating testimony from inside the company." Rachel sighed. "That's the hard part. Everyone's terrified of losing their jobs. They saw what happened to me." Alicia leaned forward. "Your story itself carries weight, but it might not be enough to topple the entire board. We also have to consider defamation laws. We need more proof or a credible witness who's willing to talk on record. Rachel's mind raced. She thought of Katrina, but putting her friend in the crosshairs was dangerous. Yet a wave of resolve hit her. Victor Hall and his cronies had physically assaulted Isaiah, fired innocent workers and destroyed lives. Enough was enough. She typed out a quick text to Katrina. "Need your help for the final blow. It's dangerous. Can we talk?" Katrina's response came quicker than expected. "Meet me at my place tonight." That evening, Rachel arrived at Katrina's small apartment on the Upper West Side. The moment Katrina opened the door, Rachel could see the fear etched on her face. She ushered Rachel in, closed the door carefully, and started pacing the living room. "Things have gotten worse at Westbridge," Katrina blurted. "Victor is on a warpath. He keeps having closed-door meetings with HR and legal. Rumor is they've begun tracking suspicious logins, trying to find the whistleblower." Rachel swallowed Katrina. "I hate asking you for help, but Alicia needs someone currently employed at Westbridge to confirm the wrongdoing. Someone with direct knowledge." Katrina stopped pacing. "That's what I was afraid you'd say." She pressed her lips together. "I can do it, but I need to be sure you'll protect my identity as long as possible." "We'll do everything we can," Rachel promised. "My reporter friend has a system to safeguard sources, but if Westbridge fights back..." Katrina nodded. "I understand. I'll gather what I can. Emails, financial ledgers, anything I can access. But if they catch me, I'm finished." Rachel felt a wave of guilt. She embraced her friend tightly. "You have no idea how much this means. Katrina, we'll bring them down together." Katrina's eyes glistened with tears as she nodded, then set her jaw with determination. "Let's do this." Over the next week, Katrina discreetly collected incriminating emails and budget documents from Westbridge's internal server. She would forward them to a secure Dropbox that Alicia had set up. Alicia, in turn, verified and catalogued each piece of evidence. By the end of the week, they had a mountain of files tying Victor Hall and other executives to large-scale fraud, including the hush money payments to keep fired employees from speaking out. The tension was suffocating. Rachel barely slept while Katrina reported feeling followed. Even Alicia mentioned suspicious phone calls and a black SUV idling near her building. They realized time was running out. Finally, Alicia arranged a secret meeting with her editor and legal counsel in a nondescript hotel conference room Rachel attended, along with Katrina, wearing a scarf and sunglasses to mask her identity from any cameras. They laid everything out: the USB data, the newly gathered emails, witness statements. The editor's eyes lit up. "This is huge," he said, flipping through the pages. "It's going to rock the corporate world. We'll need to get final confirmations from some of these sources, but it looks airtight." The news organization's legal counsel looked grave. "Westbridge has deep pockets. They'll throw everything they have at us. We need to be certain." Katrina raised her trembling hand. "I'll testify if I have to." Rachel reached out, squeezing her friend's hand in gratitude and worry. Alicia's editor nodded. "We'll run with this story. The next step is to get official comment from Westbridge. They'll likely deny everything, but once we go to print, the evidence will speak for itself." They agreed to publish the exposé the following Monday, giving them time to finalize the details and ensure maximum impact. That weekend was a feverish countdown. The anxiety was overwhelming. Rachel found herself checking over her shoulder, constantly worried that Victor's hired thugs might appear at any moment. She kept in touch with Isaiah, who was slowly recovering from his injury, but remained in hiding, fearful of a second attack. On Sunday night, Alicia called Rachel to confirm everything's set. Our Monday morning edition front page. We'll also blast it online at 6 a.m. EST. Rachel's heart pounded. This is it, then? Yes, Alicia said softly. Once it's out, there's no turning back. That night, Rachel barely slept. Anticipating the fallout, she woke at 5 a.m., refreshing her phone repeatedly. At exactly 6 a.m. The New York Times website banner changed to reveal the headline, Corporate Giant Westbridge Innovations, accused of widespread fraud and corruption. Rachel's breath caught in her throat as she read through the detailed article. Alicia had done a brilliant job weaving in the document's quotes from an anonymous source within the company and accounts from multiple fired employees. Even the detail of Isaiah's assault was mentioned, though not naming him directly. Within minutes, social media exploded with outrage. The hashtag Geyer's Westbridge scandal began trending. By 7 a.m., major TV networks picked up the story. Rachel's phone buzzed non-stop messages from old co-workers, friends, distant relatives. News trucks started gathering outside Westbridge's headquarters downtown. By mid-morning, Westbridge Innovations was in full damage control mode. Victor Hall appeared on camera, denying the accusations as baseless and fabricated by disgruntled former employees. But the evidence was too overwhelming, and the public was not fooled. An emergency board meeting convened to decide the fate of the leadership. Katrina texted Rachel, "Updates. You won't believe it. The board is furious with Victor. They're threatening to fire him." Less than an hour later, it was announced that Victor Hall had resigned effective immediately, though insiders whispered he was forcibly removed. Other top executives followed, including Clarissa Stone. As more details emerged, the authorities launched an official investigation. Subpoenas were issued for financial records, and several high-ranking officials were detained for questioning. Rachel watched the dramatic downfall unfold, a strange mixture of relief and fury. She relived her firing, standing humiliated in front of the entire company, while Victor looked on with cold indifference. Now the tables had turned, and he was the one being ejected in disgrace. An image replayed on every major news channel. Karma had arrived swiftly, and it hit hard. In the ensuing days, Westbridge Innovations' stock plummeted. Investors pulled out furious about the deception. Clients threatened lawsuits for breach of contract. The philanthropic organizations that had been shortchanged demanded reparations. It was chaos. Meanwhile, Rachel found herself thrust into the spotlight as one of the main whistleblowers, though Alicia made sure to highlight her efforts, subtly respecting her privacy as much as possible. Rachel received countless messages of support from people who had suffered at the hands of corporate greed. Job offers began trickling in from companies impressed by her courage and integrity. Katrina, though initially terrified of retribution, found an unexpected wave of respect among her co-workers for her bravery in exposing the truth. She opted to leave Westbridge, accepting a position at a rival firm that valued transparency. As for Isaiah, the underground hero, his role remained mostly in the shadows to protect him from potential retaliation. Rachel visited him at his friend's apartment once he had recovered enough to walk without wincing. She brought him a bouquet of flowers and a heartfelt note of gratitude. He smiled, sipping tea. "You did good, Miss Patterson," he said. "Now maybe some folks will think twice before they trample on the people who do the cleaning." She hugged him, tears in her eyes. "None of this would have happened without you. Isaiah, thank you for trusting me." One crisp morning, a couple of weeks after the scandal broke, Rachel returned to the Westbridge building. The place was nearly unrecognizable. Half the offices were empty, and new security measures had been implemented. She had an appointment with a transitional committee that was overseeing the aftermath. They were conducting interviews with various former employees to assess the damage and address claims. Walking through those glass doors again felt surreal. The memory of her public firing flashed in her mind, but she stood tall this time, no longer the timid victim. Employees' new faces mostly glanced at her curiously, but she ignored the stares. After her meeting, she noticed a few old co-workers huddled by a window. One recognized her and waved shyly gratitude in her expression. Wordlessly, Rachel smiled back. She could sense a shift, an atmosphere of humility that was absent before. Maybe in the wreckage the company was learning to respect people. As Rachel made her way back to the lobby, she spotted a familiar figure near the elevator. Miles Carmichael, her old supervisor. He had somehow survived the purge, though it was rumored he had cooperated extensively with the investigators, Rachel, he said, looking genuinely contrite. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for not standing up for you. I was scared. I hope you can forgive me. She studied his face for a moment, recalling how he had lowered his eyes on the day of her firing, refusing to meet her gaze. Part of her still felt angry, but anger was heavy, and she didn't want to carry it anymore. She sighed, extending her hand in a gesture of truce. It's done now. Let's just hope we all learn from this. He nodded, relief flooding his features. Thank you, he whispered, voice cracking. Before leaving, Rachel took one last walk through the building's service corridors. She wanted to see the old maintenance closet, the place where Isaiah had first handed her the key that changed everything. To her surprise, she found the door ajar. The shelves were stripped of supplies, as if the space had been gutted. She stared at the spot where the hidden passage once lay, now sealed off with fresh cement. Perhaps the new management wanted to erase every trace of the corruption's lurking grounds. She pulled the old key from her pocket, the same one Isaiah had given her the day she was fired. It felt almost mythical, now a symbol of her journey. She placed it gently on a ledge inside the closet. No one else might understand its significance, but she did. It had served its purpose. Leaving the key behind felt like letting go of a final weight. She smiled, stepped out into the hallway and headed for the main doors. In the months that followed, Rachel found herself in an exciting new role at a forward-thinking startup that prized social responsibility as much as profits. She discovered a renewed passion in her work, channeling her experiences into building ethical campaigns and nurturing a healthy office culture. Katrina thrived in her new job too, enjoying a stress-free environment where she was valued for her talents, not just her compliance. They remained close friends, often meeting for brunch and reminiscing about the Westbridge fiasco. When news broke that Victor Hall and several top executives were facing criminal charges, the sense of vindication was overwhelming. Rachel watched the televised footage of them being led into a courthouse, remembering how that same man had once publicly humiliated her. Now the entire nation saw him for what he was. Months turned into a year. Rachel's life was stable, fulfilling and peaceful in ways she never thought possible. In a strange twist of fate, being fired was the best thing that had ever happened to her. It had led her to discover her own resilience, the power of hidden allies, and the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it meant risking everything. She often thought of Isaiah, who had quietly returned to a normal life after his physical recovery. They kept in touch with occasional phone calls. He reported that he had found a new janitorial job where management treated him with respect. Sometimes he would joke, "No secret rooms in this one, at least not yet." Rachel would laugh, but then grow pensive, reminding herself of that extraordinary day. The memory of being fired in front of the whole office still stung, but it was overshadowed by what came after, the turning of the tide, the reclaiming of her dignity, and the downfall of those who thought they could do as they pleased without consequence. and so every time someone asked her about the scandal, she would just say, "I learned that sometimes the lowest moment of your life can be the key that unlocks your greatest destiny." Rachel's story reminds us how quickly life can change. One moment, everything you've worked for is ripped away. The next, an unlikely friend hands you a key that opens doors to unimaginable possibilities. Through heartbreak, betrayal, and a fierce fight for justice, she discovered an unwavering resilience deep within herself. Karma eventually found its mark, and those who reveled in her downfall faced their own reckoning. Yet the most powerful takeaway is that when we stand up for the truth, no matter how daunting, the odds we inspire others to do the same. If you found Rachel's journey compelling, please help us share this story. Like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of resilience, redemption, and real-life drama. Your support not only helps these stories reach more people, but it also reminds us all that with courage and unity, we can conquer the toughest of challenges. Thank you for watching.